Okay, so in this video, we are going to be talking about maintenance, pre-trips, and stuff like that. Greasables in the front end, in the drive shaft, things that you should definitely look over in your truck to make sure that you're not going to have any issues on the road. You know, I get it. Not everybody is perfect. We all neglect some things here or there. We all do it. It is what it is. Let's get into the video and let's go over some of the things that you should check for in your pre-trip and what you should just check for in general. Let's go. All right, so I got the hood popped so that you guys can see into the engine bay. I'm gonna go over a bunch of things that you should be looking over. Obviously, if you're not missing any coolant and your oil's fine, you know, you don't really have to check for too much, but there are little things that you should check over just, you know, to make sure you're pretty good. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is gonna be pretty basic, but you got your air filter. You definitely wanna be changing that out every 10,000 miles or when it gets dirty, as well as like your exhaust manifold. You're gonna wanna be checking to make sure you don't have any leaks. You can see, which I have a perfect example here for you guys, that section right there is all black. That's because the #1 cylinder does have a little bit of an exhaust leak. Not a big deal. I'll be getting that fixed, okay? Again, I've also had fuel lines. I've had fuel lines spit fuel and, you know, they're leaking and whatnot. So that's another thing. You want to check that. All your battery connections, make sure there's no corrosion, stuff like that. You know, it's all simple stuff pretty much under here. Make sure you don't have any wet spots, you know, check for oil leaks and all that up here. But up here, it's all pretty stupid simple and self-explanatory. It's once you start getting into like the suspension and wheels, tire, like all this stuff is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated, and that's the kind of stuff I kind of want to go over. So I'm just throwing in the engine bay just because of the fact that might as well throw it in here for any purposes. You can also tell I had a leak. My Freon was leaking out of that guy right there. You can see, zoom in on it, so you can see I had a green spot coming out of there, so you could tell that Freon was leaking at some point, but you know, that's an obvious one. You'll be able to see that. So let's get this thing closed and let's go over all the other stuff that you should be checking for your pre-trips. So one of the biggest things that people forget to do on these trucks and in general, you know, depending on how long you're out, usually guys will want to do it when they're home or a set certain miles. Like when you do your oil change, you're going to want to grease the front end and everything. So when I replace my front end components, or any components for that matter, yes, I know I need a couple of things, but you guys can see there's grease fittings on pretty much a lot of the stuff underneath here. U-joints are greasable, the ball joints are greasable, so these have been done at some point. I do need to do them again, but everything has a grease joint. I need a tie rod up here, and I know I need to replace the tie rod over here. So between those two, you're gonna wanna pretty much be able to grease everything. But this is basically where you're gonna be looking for up here. Now, I'm not gonna do it in this video, but I can show you. You can check the ball joints and you can check for any play in the steering. And sometimes you can even come up here, and if I can get my hand up here without getting too filthy, there's a steering bar up here. You can see that I have a pretty decent amount of play, and you can also see that the tie rod end kind of moves a little bit inside of here, but you can see that the steering box actually moves. So there's actually a little bit of play in this tie rod, and you can see there's a little bit of play in that tie rod. So I do need to get those replaced, but obviously I'm gonna do that with greasable options. Now, that you're able to figure out the obvious with that, there are things that you won't be able to see when it's under a load like this. You're gonna wanna jack up one side and you'll be able to wiggle it. Usually you can check your U-joints this way, and you can check your ball joints this way by wiggling back and forth to make sure that, you know, you don't have any play in them, but you're not gonna be able to check your ball joints and things like that when it's down under. So you're not gonna be able to do this every time you do a pre-trip. It's just, you're not going to jack your vehicle up every time. You're just going to be able to give it a quick glance over and make sure everything's good. But if you see that you start having a little bit more and more play in the steering wheel, obviously, okay, something's wrong. It's time to jack it up and figure out what's wrong with it. So start replacing parts. It is on my to-do list. I just have not had the time to go through and do it. When I put grease in it, it's a solid. So I will be doing them at some point, but for now, not too big a deal. And then if you are somebody that's running bigger tires, or you run an older Dodge just in general, definitely get yourself a steering brace. These things are pretty sweet, and it has a greasable fitting right there. Pretty much it under here. Now, another thing, you're gonna be able to check your wheel bearings while you're up in the air. Check your brake calipers, make sure the wheels spin freely, make sure you don't have any play or slop in any of that. You can take a long bar and put it under there. Make sure your wheel's not going to move. Like if you're looking at it like this, make sure it's not going to move like this. So I've seen wheel bearings fly off. People don't check them. I try to check mine as often as possible. If you're somebody that's going to go off-roading a lot, you're going to have to check them more often than not. So that's pretty much it under the front end. So this is right here, the grease gun that I'm using currently. And if you have a little bit of extra money set aside, go and buy one of these greasable ends here. This is so much better and will save you so much time over anything else. We're gonna get to tires in a little bit, but I am gonna grease my videos, grease everything in this video, but not like, I'm not gonna film it or anything like that, but I do wanna go through and film everything. Now, we're gonna get underneath the truck here. You guys will be able to see, I am gonna be replacing this transfer case once I shorten this drive shaft. So you can see there's a little bit of black backlash, that's perfectly normal, but my seal is pressed in a little bit. So you can see that there's fluid on the end of the drive shaft. So obviously there's a little leak here. You are gonna need a seal. I'm going to need a seal. So I also have the upgraded carrier bearing from the 2006 truck, which is a lot better than the carrier bearing from the 2004 that I have. But these bearings, the rubber in them goes, so you definitely want to watch that. Make sure the drive shaft doesn't actually fall out, but this one has been awesome. I have had no issues. Check your U-joints, make sure everything is solid, make sure there's no play in between the U-joints and everything. And these, again, I'm pretty sure, yeah, there's a grease zerk right there. You're gonna want to be able, you will be able to grease all these. I'm gonna do that now because I can kind of feel a little bit of drag in the drivetrain, and I think that's what it is. So keep making our way down back here. Something super important to check if you've done some work to your truck in the last little while is you're going to want to check your drive shaft bolts, make sure that those aren't going to come out, and your seal back here. This isn't from the seal itself. This is actually fuel, so we don't have a leak back here. This is literally just fuel. So you'll always want to check that and make sure everything's good. You know, you can check your shocks and go and, you know, stuff like that, but you can see these don't look too bad. They're fairly new. You're going to want to replace these every 50,000. That's just the general rule of thumb is what I've been told, and that's pretty much what I do. Check, make sure all your caliper bolts, nothing's loose. Make sure, you know, there's no play in anything. Simple stuff like that, okay? E-brake cable right there. Now, while you're down here doing all this, you can check in the tires, make sure there's like no, you know, nails or anything like that. These are fairly new, so we shouldn't have any issues with nails yet, but as they go down, nails will have more and more chance of being able to puncture tires, but you can go from there. Also, you're gonna wanna check for exhaust leaks down here. This exhaust has actually passed in my case, so not really a big issue there. Now, if you have a four-wheel drive truck, I'm gonna come down here. I'm laying on stones for you guys, so I hope you guys appreciate a little bit of this. But this is now a two-wheel drive truck, whereas it used to be four-wheel. So you guys can see there's no U-joints in there. We just have the stubby in there to hold the wheel bearing in. If you do decide to take the axles out and run it like that, you do need to put the stubby in. I have seen people actually try to do this without putting the stubby in, and you will lose a wheel bearing fairly quick. So you guys can see, you can always spin your front hub to make sure there's no issues. As you can see, mine's pretty worn out. There is in and out play. There's also like, you can just hear how bad pretty much everything is. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not running a front drive shaft, but you always want to grease your front drive shafts. You can also spin up here and make sure there's no play or slop or anything. There's not enough to really concern me, but again, this truck has been pretty much fully converted to two-wheel drive. We don't have any front axles, and we don't have the front drive shaft in. So if you don't grease your front drive shaft every now and again, you will have a transfer case explode. It's just gonna happen. I've seen it happen plenty of times, and even drive shafts that have been greased, sometimes they just have a tendency to bind up and you'll have a transfer case explode. And unfortunately, in Anthony's case, one of the guys that leased with us, his truck actually did that. He had a third gen. He just went through and greased and serviced everything, and the front drive shaft took out the T-case. The T-case, everything went crazy and took out the tranny line and a fuel line, and the truck ended up catching on fire and burning to the ground. And I remember there was some comments on that. Oh, did he have a fire extinguisher, this and that? those people are morons, okay? I hate when people think that they know a situation better than they do. It's like one of those things, if you have a huge fuel fire, your little fire extinguisher that you carry around isn't gonna do much. Don't talk when you don't know a situation. That's just how I see it. But it can happen, it has happened, I've seen it happen. Just be safe, take care of your equipment, and you'll avoid issues like that. So, now, what I like to do after I've driven, you know, a good distance, this will go after your pre-trip, but after you've driven for a little while, I carry around one of these. This is an infrared thermometer, and you can pretty much, you know, take your thing right there, 125 degrees on that nut in the middle. That's pretty good. Now what you're gonna wanna do is you're not really worrying about how hot it actually gets. You're gonna wanna make sure that they're both pretty even. So as you can see, this one's 133. So this one is about 8 degrees hotter. So take that how you will, make sure everything's gonna be fine. There could be an issue, but 8 degrees, I'm pretty sure you really shouldn't, I wouldn't worry too much about 8 degrees, but make sure that they're all relatively in the same area, okay? Now, if you have wheel covers like I do, it's not really gonna help you too much, but you will be able to put it on the transmission, put it on the transfer case, make sure everything's in relatively good shape, okay? So I was just showing her, this is something you guys will wanna check out for, and I know a couple people in the video before actually caught this. This isn't the case now, but you guys can see that there is ever so slightly a little line right there. That means that the wheel has actually spun even though the lugs are tight. So it actually moved ever so slightly, not enough to cause an issue. I did catch it, I did remedy it. So the wheels are torqued now, but I'm unfortunately always gonna have to live with the fact that that is there. So not a big deal now, but you do need to catch it and pay attention to that so a wheel does not actually fly off. So always make sure your wheels are torqued. I do 140. People have told me that they do a little bit tighter. You know, it is what it is. You can do whatever you want. I've always done 140 and never had an issue. I may have missed the two fronts that day and not tightened them all the way. I don't know. I don't know what the case was. Now, next thing I want to show you. So you guys can obviously see that we have a flat tire, right? This tire actually blew out, okay? The tread separated, and you know, we had an issue there. They're China bombs. That's basically what happens with them. So, something I recommend, because if you don't use this system, this is a TPMS system, okay? I like this system very much, and this is what I use on the truck. I've never had an issue. It's caught flat tires, this flat tire for me the other day, and you know, it's pretty good, okay? So they just sit on the end there, and it'll tell you what your tire pressure is. If you don't have that, how are you going to test your tire pressures when you have these nice wheel covers in here? You know, you're not going to be able to test that. So I mean, you can probably get it in there. Yeah, right here's my stem, so it's going to be a pain, but I recommend having a TPMS. In this case, it's on the trailer, so it's like now you got to go check the trailer pressures every single day. But if you hit a nail or you have a valve stem go out while you're driving down the road, you're not going to catch that. So it's going to blow out by the time you stop and figure it out. Somehow I don't have anything on my face from filming this video, but this is a lot of the stuff that I, you know, look out for when I'm doing my pre-trip and all that. You guys can see there's a drain plug right there. You want to make sure that there's no fluid leaking out of that. There's no fluid leaking out the bottom. I can see a little bit there, but again, I'm pretty sure that that's fuel, but fuel has a distinct smell to it. So if I take my finger, that's definitely fuel. So it's not coming from the pumpkin itself. So it's coming from up there. I'm still trying to figure out a remedy. You guys can see there's like fuel everywhere from the aux tank. I didn't even fill the aux tank up this time. That's how ridiculous it's getting. So pretty bad design on that part, but the aux tank is leaking. Again, this is a brand new cap, all that. And you can see that's fuel. So that leaks down, goes down into the bed, goes down into that hole down there, and now we have a big mess. So pretty obvious one. You want to check your fire extinguisher every single day. Make sure that you are in the green zone, which I am, ever so slightly, but I am, okay? And then for the obvious stuff, you're going to want to check your lights, your turn signals, all the other fun stuff. And I keep, you know, oil, coolant, all that stuff with me. And your kingpin or your gooseneck ball, you're going to want to grease that every day. Make sure your balls are greased. Always make sure they're greased. So that's pretty much going to do it. Let me know if I missed anything, because this is basically the checklist that I go through, not every single day, but you know, as much as possible. When I'm home, I try to look over this stuff and go from there. But let me know what else you guys have. Put it down in the comments. Let me know, because there is a checklist on how to do your pre-trip and everything, so there is actual specific things to look for, but this is my main checklist. This is what I pretty much try to look for as much as possible. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you guys in the next one. Safe travels. See ya. So cute.